what if the most dangerous man in the Allied army was also the one they couldn't afford to lose? London, late 1944. Downing Street is quiet, but the war room is not. A folder lands on Winston Churchill's desk, another report about General George S. Patton. Brilliant, fast, fearless, also uncontrollable. In private, Churchill wrestles with a question that no speech could ever admit. Was Patton the Allies' sharpest weapon, or the liability that could crack the alliance at the worst possible moment? Because the answer wasn't simple. It never was. Before Patton became the hero of France, he became a political nightmare. August 1943. London, 23:15 hours. Churchill sits under warm lamplight in number 10. Outside, the city is darker than usual. Blackout habits linger even when the bombs don't fall. On his desk, dispatches from the Mediterranean, clipped memos, and a name that keeps returning like a drumbeat. Patton. In the official reports, Patton is everything the Allies want. In a commander, decisive, aggressive, relentless. Sicily has fallen. The Allied machine looks unstoppable. But attached to the victories is something else. A scandal.
Patton has slapped a soldier in a hospital twice, accusing him of cowardice for what we now recognize as battle fatigue. Word spreads. Officers whisper. Journalists sniff around the edges. Washington reacts with alarm because it isn't just a moral problem.
It's an image problem.
Churchill understands image the way generals understand terrain. Britain is fighting with American power now. American ships, American factories, American manpower. Every scandal involving an American general threatens the public unity of the alliance. And Churchill also knows something more personal, more complicated.
He is drawn to men of force.
Churchill admires energy. He admires offensive spirit. He admires audacity. Patton has those qualities in excess. But excess is dangerous inside coalition warfare, because coalition warfare isn't like commanding a single army. It's like balancing glass on a moving truck. One wrong move, one public outrage, one insult, one headline, and the partnership begins to crack. Privately, Churchill's mind runs through the consequences. If Patton is removed, does the American public see it as humiliation? If Patton stays, does Britain get dragged into an American scandal? If Patton can't control himself in a hospital, can he control himself in a coalition? The question forms quietly in Churchill's head long before Normandy. Is Patton an asset or a liability? Churchill never says this on the radio. He never says it in Parliament. But in Downing Street, in private conversations, leaders can be honest. Honesty is not always flattering. Patton, Churchill suspects, might be the kind of general who wins battles and creates political fires that others must extinguish. Then 1944 arrives. France opens, German armies tremble, and Patton becomes something far more dangerous than a scandal. He becomes necessary. July 1944, Normandy. The hedgerows are a maze of green walls and death. The Allied landing succeeded, but now the war is stuck in the mud. Progress is measured in yards. Every field is a fortress. Every lane can hide a machine gun. In London, Churchill watches the map. The arrows are moving too slowly. Then Operation Cobra hits like a hammer. The American breakout begins. The German front fractures. And suddenly Patton's Third Army is unleashed into open country. This is Patton's element. He doesn't push. He pours. Columns surge forward. German units collapse into retreat. Towns fall in days. The tempo changes so abruptly it feels unreal. Churchill studies the reports and senses the same thing the Germans sense. Patton isn't just advancing. He's hunting. And for Churchill, this is where the question becomes painful. Because Patton's aggressiveness is exactly what Western Europe needs to break Germany's spine. But Patton's aggressiveness doesn't stop at German lines. It spills into politics. Patton speaks in absolutes. He speaks in judgments. He speaks as if war is a pure contest of will, and anyone who slows him down is an obstacle. He complains about caution. He bristles at coordination. He has little patience for the diplomatic choreography required between British and American command. Churchill understands the strategic value. Patton's speed could shorten the war. Every week saved is thousands of lives. Every German unit destroyed faster reduces the chance of a prolonged winter campaign. But Churchill also senses the fragile structure underneath. Britain needs the US. The US does not need Britain in the same way anymore. And if Patton's behavior inflames tension between Allied commanders, Churchill knows the result. Disputes over supplies, fights over priority, broken trust at the top, slower decisions in crisis. Ironically, Patton's personality could slow victory even while his tanks accelerate it. So Churchill's private reflection deepens. Patton is an asset on the battlefield. But what does he do to the alliance? And then there's another thing. Patton becomes visible. He becomes famous. He becomes myth. Myth is powerful, but myth can be unstable. A mythic general can become bigger than the coalition itself. Then Patton's war expands beyond Germany into the next enemy he can already see coming. And Churchill hears it. Late 1944. Germany is weakening, but not dead. The Western Allies still need the Soviet Union to keep pressure on the Eastern Front. Every German division pinned in the East is one less division crushing American troops in the West. But Patton's mind is already turning past Berlin. He distrusts the Soviets openly. In private, he talks like the next war is already scheduled. He sees the Red Army not as ally, but as future rival. Churchill shares the suspicion he always has. But Churchill is not a tank commander. He is a statesman. He understands timing. You can suspect Stalin. You can fear Stalin. But you cannot openly antagonize Stalin before Germany collapses without risking the coalition's immediate war aims. Patton's instinct may be correct historically. Cold War logic is visible in hindsight. But Churchill's perspective is brutal. Even a correct instinct can be politically reckless if spoken too soon. Because diplomacy is theater. And in that theater, uncontrolled speech can become a weapon pointed at your own side. Churchill imagines headlines, diplomatic cables, and what it would do to trust. Would Stalin harden his stance on post-war borders? Would coordination fracture at the critical phase of the war? Would the Soviets slow cooperation precisely when Allied planning needs stability? This is where Churchill's private thought becomes sharp. Patton might be right about the future, but Patton could be dangerous to the present. Churchill's question shifts. Not is Patton right? But can Patton be controlled long enough to win the war we're actually fighting? And then just as these worries rise, Germany strikes back in the Ardennes. A winter offensive, a gamble, and the alliance is tested in the most violent way possible. Because in the Bulge, Patton does something so fast, so decisive, that even his critics go quiet. For a moment, December 1944, the Ardennes, snow, fog, confusion. Germany launches a surprise offensive. American lines buckle. Panic ripples through command channels. The weather grounds air power the Allies' greatest advantage. This is exactly the kind of chaos that coalition warfare hates: sudden crisis, incomplete information pressure to decide in hours. And this is where Patton becomes Patton. He pivots his army 90 degrees through winter roads and logistical nightmare. The movement is so aggressive, it sounds impossible in briefings. Patton drives north to relieve Bastogne. The famous surrounded town becomes a symbol, not just of American resistance, but of Allied survival. Churchill reads the dispatches and sees the reality. In moments of crisis, Patton is not just useful. He is the difference between collapse and recovery. And suddenly Churchill's earlier concerns feel smaller. Not gone, not forgotten, but outweighed by something that cannot be ignored. Patton delivers. That doesn't erase his liabilities. It reframes them. Churchill's private reflection becomes colder, more pragmatic. Yes, Patton's mouth is dangerous. Yes, his ego is massive. Yes, his impulsiveness creates political fires. But when German steel cuts into Allied lines, Patton doesn't hesitate. He acts. And in war, action can be more valuable than harmony. Yet the political cost returns immediately after. Patton keeps talking, keeps provoking, keeps existing on the edge of what Allied leaders can tolerate. So the question becomes sharper than ever. Patton is clearly an asset. But is he an asset the alliance can survive? Or is he the kind of weapon that eventually injures the hand holding it? Then the war ends, and the final judgment isn't delivered on a battlefield, It's delivered in the cold logic of post-war politics. May 1945. Germany collapses. Europe exhales. But the moment victory arrives, the alliance changes shape. A coalition held together by necessity begins to separate into national interests. And now, Patton's personality becomes even more dangerous because in peace, generals don't get the same forgiveness they get in war. Patton is still outspoken, still impatient, still intensely anti-Soviet, still convinced that the next conflict is already forming. Churchill, now facing political headwinds at home, watches the world reconfigure. Britain is financially strained. The empire is weakening. The United States is rising into global dominance. The Soviet Union is carving influence across Eastern Europe. This is no longer a battlefield contest. It's a diplomatic one. And Patton is not a diplomat. In Churchill's private reflections, the answer becomes finally clear. Not simple, but clear. Patton was both, a battlefield asset of rare intensity, and a political liability that required constant containment. Patton is a spear. A spear does not negotiate. A spear does not reassure allies. A spear punctures enemy lines, and sometimes if you swing it without control, it cuts your own coalition. Churchill's final calculus feels like something he would never say publicly, but could admit privately. Without Patton, the Western War might have dragged longer. With Patton, alliance management became harder. But in total, war speed and destruction often outweigh discomfort. So was Patton worth it? Churchill's likely private verdict is pragmatic. Yes, because victory came first. But it came at a cost. It proved the alliance could win with men like Patton, yet could not comfortably live with them afterward. And that may be the most honest lesson of all. Some leaders are built for war, not peace. Patton was one of them. If you had been in Churchill's chair watching Patton win battles and ignite controversies, would you have protected him as an indispensable weapon, or removed him before he fractured the alliance? Drop your verdict below asset or liability. And if you want the next episode, Churchill's private fury at Montgomery's insults, subscribe, because the war behind the war is just getting started.